Assalamualaikum and greetings to all. So, welcome to the revision session for our course LLS3374 Translating Language and Culture, Negotiations and Representations. So, basically, ladies and gentlemen, what we are going to do today is to actually look at week 1's lesson until week 13's lesson. So basically, we're going to do revision for all critical concepts that we have learned so far. So if you look very carefully at this diagram that I have prepared here, so if you look in the middle here, we are talking about meaning. Ladies and gentlemen, when you talk about negotiations, when you talk about representations, when you talk about translations, when you talk about cultural identity, it's all about making meaning. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's begin our revision session by first looking at the first critical concept that we learned this semester, representations. So, if we look here, representations. The simplest definition is representation is when you talk about an image or when you talk about an idea that is used to illustrate experience in terms of meeting people, in terms of looking at behavior, in terms of your experience or looking at objects. And whatever that you look at, they carry or convey meaning. So very importantly, representations, they are images, events, behaviors that carry meaning. And this meaning, it is culturally biased. So if let's say you are from a Malay society, then the experience that you have, the people that you will meet is basically give you that cultural bias of Malay society. So that's representations. And under representation, if we look very carefully, we have two things that we have to understand. The first one, types of representation. So we have two types of representation. The first one is what we call mental representations. Now, mental representations are events, actions, images from the past that relate to the current situation or that explain the current situations. And these mental representations can come in terms of smell or visual or touch or movement. Something that reminds you of incident or behavior or people from the past. So that's mental representations. And the second type of representation is what we call language as a system of representations. So you use language to explain your meaning. Regardless of the language that you use, if you want to explain something, if you want to explain an experience, if you want to explain an object, you have to use a language. So this language carry meaning or give meaning to your representation. So two types of representations, mental representations and language as a system of representations. And then we talk about approaches to representations. When you want to explain representations, you can explain in terms of these three approaches. The first one is reflective. Reflective is when you explain something as is. For example, if you look at an apple, it is an apple because you explain it, the apple as is. If the color is red, then you say the apple is red. So that is reflective. The second one is intentional. Intentional is when you want to represent something, it depends on your intention, the intention of the speakers or the intention of the doers. So very important, intentional approach to representation is about your intention. The third one or the third approach to representation is constructivist. Now, constructivist is when you actually construct your own meaning, construct your own understanding of that particular object or of that particular experience. So when you talk about intentional, it is your or the doer's intention. And when you talk about constructivist, it's others' framework or construction of meaning. So 3 approaches to representations. Ladies and gentlemen, so if we look very carefully, if you talk about representation, we have representation, the general term here, it's about meaning. And then there's two types of representation, mental representations as well as language as a system of representations. And then we have 3 approaches to representations, reflective, intentional, and constructivist. Now we move on to the second critical concept that we learn, the bigger concept, which is what we call negotiations. Now, what is a negotiation process? So basically, when you talk about negotiations, it's about discussions. It's about getting solutions through exchange of meaning. So look very carefully, we have the word meaning here. Because when you discuss, of course, you want to share meaning. Without sharing of meaning, you cannot get into a solution. So negotiations are discussions in order to get solutions through exchange of meaning, and you give and take. And because of that, you lose something and you gain something. So that's negotiations. And when you talk about strategies of negotiations, we have basically five negotiation strategies. The first one is what we call accommodating. Now, accommodating is when you lose a little bit and the other party wins a little bit more. Now, why do you apply this strategy? Because you want to maintain good relationships. Very important. So that's why you are willing to lose a little bit. You let the other party wins a little bit more. So that's number 1. Number 2 is avoiding. Now, when both of you and the other party goes into this negotiation process, in the middle of the discussion, you realize that both of you will not be getting what both of you want. So as a result, you avoid the negotiation process, you stop the process, and as a result, it's a lose-lose situation. The third one, a lot of people like to use collaborating because it's a win-win situation. You get something, I get something. You lose something, I lose something. So what happens is that there's a balance in terms of winning as well as in terms of losing. So win-win situation. Now, number 4, this is where you actually win a little bit more and the other party loses a little bit more. So this is number 4 is the opposite of number 1. So what happens is that when you compete, when you use a competing strategy, you don't want to maintain a relationship with the other party. You feel that, okay, this is the only negotiation process that I'm going to have with this particular group of people or with this party. So I'm not going to do it anymore. So I want to have a competing strategy. So I win a little bit more and the other party is willing to lose a little bit more because he or she feels that he or she wants to maintain a good relationship. The last strategy is what we call compromising. Now, compromising is when you actually split the difference. For example, you have a business partner, and then the profit is 101 apples, for example. So you get 50 apples, the other party gets 50 apples. There's 1 apple left because it's 101. So what happens is that you can, number 1, eat the apple together with the other party. Or number 2, you can sell the apple. Let's say the cost, the sale is 1 ringgit. So you get 50 cents and the other party gets 50 cents. So that's the meaning of split the difference. So ladies and gentlemen, basically negotiation strategies, we have 5: accommodating, lose-win, avoiding, lose-lose, collaborating, win-win, competing, win-lose, uncompromising split the difference. So we have covered so far representations as well as negotiations. And these two, the crust or the main theme is meaning. And now we go to the biggest part of our concepts that we learn this semester, which is translation. So basically we have, under translation, we have theories, we have strategies, we have approaches. Now this is conventional approaches, and then we have subcategories of translation. So let's begin our venture into translation. What does it mean by translation?